The next part, I want to come to the Russia-Ukraine war. So I want to start by asking you about the significance of Biden's decision to use these long-range missiles. And is he trying to tie Trump's hand for a possible peace deal before Trump takes charge in January 20th?
So first, to be clear, remember Biden isn't in control of most of his faculties. It's people, who run the shadows around Biden in that sense. Yes, but it is. It absolutely is. I fundamentally believe that Trump needs to make a very public call to Putin and tell him, please don't fall for all of this. We'll sort it out when I come to power.
The next part, I want to come to the Russia-Ukraine war. So I want to start by asking you about the significance of Biden's decision to use these long-range missiles. And is he trying to tie Trump's hand for a possible peace deal before Trump takes charge in January 20th?
So first, to be clear, remember Biden isn't in control of most of his faculties. It's people, who run the shadows around Biden in that sense. Yes, but it is. It absolutely is. And the problem really is with the Democrats is you've seen the last time the extent that they would go to. There was the collusion of Obama himself in 2016, where without any evidence, we've still not seen the evidence, by the way, 8 years down the line, of Russian interference in American elections. They expelled 70, 80 diplomats. Then there was the whole Russia collusion hoax and things like that, which was supported by the entire sort of intelligence community, which is now conclusively proven to be a hoax. And those same intelligence community walas are now saying, oh, well, we never actually said it was a hoax. We said we believe, we never said that there was actual Russian conspiracy. We said we believe there is a Russian conspiracy. They're now sort of, and, these are the kind of people who, because it's, sorry to use this language, but because it's a circle jerk of validation, they can all be wrong and they will validate each other saying, well, given all the available intelligence, it was the best we could do. These are the same people, saying Tulsi Gabbard isn't fit to run the National Intelligence Agency. Why? Because she doesn't have the same mindset as us. I don't know if you read the New York Times piece today, where the entire thing was smearing her, but somewhere in the middle they admit there is not a shred of evidence that she collaborated with Russia. It's just the mindset. She doesn't think like us, So it's just that the sheer venom and vindictiveness of the Democrats is so great. And you're now seeing this with targeting, and there is something very specific about that targeting. See, an ATACAMS missile, which is the long range, it's not long range really, it's a short to medium range ballistic missile. The problem with it is the targeting information, who is giving them the targeting information? Ukraine has no satellites of its own. So it's Western satellites targeting that in. With those particular missiles, because they are nuclear capable, the targeting can only be input by a NATO officer. So clearly there is some kind of NATO officer there on the ground who's inputting the targeting data, which means it is NATO actually carrying out the strike. Only the button being pushed is by a Ukrainian, if that at all. It may even be just Ukrainian painted, and the entire operation, including the pushing of the button, is carried out by a NATO soldier. So Russia has a fairly valid point when it says it's a NATO attack on Russia. Now, the question is, what is Russia going to do about it? Because we've heard these threats from Russia before over the last 2-3 years, where they keep saying, oh, this is a NATO attack, this is a NATO attack. But they do nothing. On the other hand, you can fall into this complacency because for 2 years they've done nothing. This time also they will do nothing. And this whole changing of the nuclear doctrine is compensating for impotence. I fundamentally believe that Trump needs to make a very public call to Putin and tell him, please don't fall for all of this. We'll sort it out when I come to power. They're just going to queer the pitch. He made a huge mistake not doing that the last time. He also, because he got an intelligence briefing without any intelligence, by the way, without any proof, by the way, that Russians had interfered in the election, he had to go along with Russian election interference. And he had to say, yes, yes, there was. This time he has zero faith in the intel community, of course. He's much wiser. He needs to be publicly calling up Putin and saying, buddy, don't fall for this. He actually needs to get out ahead if he wants to stop this and sabotage Biden. Of course, they'll all accuse him of undercutting the serving president and whatnot, whatnot. I mean, really, do you want to play nice in a situation like this where they're trying to feed you, essentially give you a poisoned chalice? It's for Trump to decide, but I don't know what side of that particular equation he's going to come down on.
So even if there is a peace deal between Russia and Ukraine, I've been listening to a lot of podcasts and eminent professors like John Mearsheimer. They have said that it would be very difficult for Trump to negotiate a peace deal between Russia and Ukraine because Putin's demands is going to be too high. So what is your assessment of that statement?
I think Putin's demands are always going to be what it is currently, which is for a permanent uh, guarantee that Ukraine will never be allowed into NATO, and for Russia to either keep the land it has. I think the maximalist Russia claim will be the east bank of the Dnieper River. That would be absolute maximal Russian claim. Minimal Russian claim will be lands currently held plus no joining of NATO and no integration into Europe. Now, look at it from Trump's point of view. Does he really want to keep funding this huge money laundering machine that is the Ukraine war? Uh, with a president who's actually colluded and conspired and fed a lot of the Russia collusion hoax against him. And Ukraine realizes that, which is why it's taken a much more conciliatory approach ever since the election. Even a week before the election, it started sounding a lot more conciliatory. And you have to ask yourself, does a country that is suddenly trying to be more conciliatory, why does it suddenly escalate by using nuclear capable ballistic missiles on its attacks against Russia? And these are all the silos within, the Ukrainian government, which are controlled by different factions and parties acting out. Um, Trump will very happily throw Ukraine under the truck. I don't think he gives a damn about Ukraine. I don't think he gives a damn about any country other than America. He's a very transactionally minded person that way. Ukraine will have to prove its worth because, these sort of shibboleths which NATO has. Europe is the center of American security, and Trump is sitting in DC thinking, how exactly are you the center of my security? There's like a 8,000-kilometer ocean between the two of us. What exactly are you doing in terms of my security? I don't understand this. And there are several lines. There is first Poland, then there is Germany, then there is France, then there is the UK, the unsinkable aircraft carrier. It's called the USS United Kingdom, which itself then has two more aircraft carriers, which are sinkable, by the way. So, it's not going to sell with him. I don't see Ukraine being of any worth to a man who does not believe in European primacy, in Eurocentrism, who doesn't seek validation from Europe, and who believes that it is unnecessary to provoke Russia. I could be wrong. It could be completely different in that sense, but it isn't. Um, at least given his past behavior. So that's going to be his sort of thing with Ukraine. Second is the prospect she starts an Eastern war, in which case Ukraine is going to be toast. I mean, Ukraine was, cause celebre till the entire Gaza thing started off. And then nobody had any time for Ukraine anymore, and all the attention was diverted to Gaza. Now, remember, Ukraine and Gaza are two different issues. Ukraine requires um, uh, low value ammunition. It requires a lot of low value ammunition. The Israeli campaign requires a lot of high value air launched ammunition. two complete, so they're not stressing the same parts of the American economy. In fact, you could say the Israeli campaign is very beneficial to the American economy because it sustains the high tech economy. These are all high precision devices and things. For Ukraine, America has to go looking for dumb artillery shells. It has to go around looking for rifles and bullets and things like that, which it's not really a great value add for the economy and things like that. If things start up in the east, it will be both quantity and quality, and you'll see both Israel and Ukraine come under pressure. Out of all of these, if you look at it, surely in terms of a priority chart, Ukraine will automatically become the lowest priority.
So let's say that Trump is able to negotiate a peace deal. Given that the trust is so low between Russia and the collective West, uh, many people have said that this could end up like a frozen conflict, like the Korean War. So, what is your assessment on that? Do you think the
Yes,
lines will freeze and the conflict might start after a few years?
I do believe, given how much they will hem in Trump, the Democrats and the Uniparty, I do believe that Ukraine is headed. The best case scenario is a frozen conflict, like we saw in the Donbass from 2014 to 2022. A lot of people were dying. There was a lot of shelling happening and things, but it was completely frozen. But I don't know if you saw in the last week or so, Russian forces have made very significant gains around Kupiansk and things like that. Uh, are we going to bet on the fact that America is going to keep pushing the levels of equipment ad infinitum to Ukraine to keep the Russians in check? And the problem is, Ukraine is asking for so much. It's not Americans doing the fighting like in Afghanistan and Iraq. See, protecting your own troops is a completely different thing from protecting Ukrainian troops. Um, it's I personally don't think even a frozen conflict will stay frozen for too long, because freezing of a conflict only ends up helping Russia. Let's look at the previous frozen conflict, if you want to look at it that way, which was the first Chechen war, which Russia lost in a sense, stalemated, where Pavel Grachev turned out to be completely an incompetent general. It sort of started off again in about 4 to 6 years later when Putin was prime minister. And at that point, it became an absolute blitzkrieg. They completely took over Chechnya completely, destroyed it completely, sure, but took it over completely. Changed the government, and it's under a complete lunatic at the moment, but it's very effectively under Russia at the moment. In fact, that lunatic provides a lot of fighting forces in Ukraine.
Kadyrov.
So, yeah, Ramzan Kadyrov. Whack job and a half. Huh? I mean, as whack jobs go, like, fellows right up there with Idi Amin and Papa Doc. You know, if Papa Doc in Haiti and Idi Amin in Uganda had a love child, that would look like Ramzan Kadyrov. Of course, if he converted to Islam, he would be Ramzan Kadyrov. But that's the past example
Mhm.
of a frozen conflict we have. The other frozen conflict is, South Ossetia and Georgia. Uh, Again, you saw the same thing. It was frozen. Saakashvili tried poking the Russian bear, and look what happened at the end. South Ossetia and that other part I forget got
Abkhazia.
Abkhazia got uh, severed permanently from Georgia, declared
Mhm.
independent states, and the Georgians were thrashed very badly there. So you've seen these sort of two-stage conflicts happen. Have you noticed? First
Mhm.
intense stage results in a stalemate, and the second stage is boom, the Russians go in after years and something happens. So you'll see even that frozen conflict kind of favors Russia in that sense.
Mhm. Great explainer, Abhijit. So, my final few questions about this topic would be the importance of Pokrovsk for Ukraine. So many analysts have said that if once Russia captures Pokrovsk, that the Ukraine army might begin to collapse. So do you think the statement is true? How true is uh, how important is Pokrovsk for Ukraine?
Look, it's important, but it's not one of those center of gravity Schwerpunkt or whatever it's called, to lead to the collapse of the Ukrainian army. To be fair, the Ukraine army is extremely badly managed. They are extremely stretched thin on resources, especially on human resources. Nobody wants to serve in the Ukrainian army because they know it's a meat grinder.
Mhm.
And the more corruption that they see back home, the less is the willingness to go fight.
Yes.
At some point, that will evaporates. Now, you could say that the will would evaporate first on the Russian side, except if you actually believe the Western propaganda that Putin is this nasty, horrible, Hitler like dictator, or Stalin like dictator in this case. He's not going to allow the will to collapse. Remember, the USSR suffered much, much more horrific losses in World War II than it did in World War One. And World War One, because of the Tsar, the weak Tsar, when morale completely collapsed across the entire front after the Brusilov offensive. In World War Two, it didn't matter. I mean, the Germans came much deeper into Russia in World War Two than they did in World War One. They killed many, many, 10 times the amount of Russians that they killed in World War One. And yet morale didn't break on the Russian side because they had a very strong sort of leadership. Ukraine, on the other hand, I don't think Zelensky counts as a strong leadership by any stretch of the imagination. You see, he's certainly a Hollywood type leader, an image managed leader, but the kind of political control you need and the kind of sort of oligarch manipulation that you see happening in Ukraine, uh, this is not a conflict that Ukraine can win under any situation. Their best chance was that Istanbul conference, which Boris Johnson aborted. Well, best of luck to the Ukrainians. They're lovely people. They probably deserve a lot more than they're getting, but you know, history is not about justice.
Glad you brought up the Istanbul peace negotiation. So Turkey has once again presented a peace plan at the G20. My question is, why does India not actively try to negotiate an end to this conflict? Do you think we lack the diplomatic capability, or is it other
Look,
factors?
negotiating an end to a conflict involves years of scholarly research where you have to have the scholarly ability to have engaged with both sides in the past, understand the power structures of both sides, understand the changes in power structures of both sides, have a deep sociological understanding of both sides. Where does India do primary research? France, even Britain, America, their students go to all these countries and learn about these countries firsthand. They have huge diplomatic corps that are constantly engaging with them and things like that. India, on the other hand, every time it brings up a sort of negotiation, it rubs everybody the wrong way. In their entire history, the Israelis and the Palestinians have never agreed on anything except the Indian partition plan for Palestine in 1947. And they both agreed for the first time in their very existence that whatever the partition of Palestine would be, the Indian plan was rotten to the core. Okay. Uh, Truly, I mean, India has managed that. We managed to unite the Israelis and the Palestinians behind believing that the Indian plan was rotten. We also, incidentally, rubbed South Korea the wrong way during the end of the Korean War because Syngman Rhee hated Indians by the end of it. He believed we were communist agents. He believed we were propagating a North Korean line. And relations between Korea and India were rotten for South Korea and India were rotten for a very, very long time because of Syngman Rhee's predisposition and the role we played in the Korean War. We've also seen how Nehru and Menon and people like that unnecessarily rubbed America the wrong way, rubbed a lot of people the wrong way, in fact. So, diplomatic finesse is something we have not had. We don't have the building blocks to be negotiating this peace, and we have nothing to offer except venues. Where the Swiss and the Finns come in is that they offer Helsinki or Geneva as negotiation, or the Austrians have to offer, they offer Vienna. So, it depends. Do you want a beautiful Arctic Scandinavian landscape, or do you want the alpine beauty of Geneva or Zurich or Interlaken or whatever to carry out the negotiations? Or do you want to have a high culture setting where you can go to the opera in the evening like you can in Vienna? What does Delhi have to offer? Or because honestly, even from a negotiating point of view, you're looking, my God, the first thing people are going to have on their minds during a very tense negotiation is 1,000 plus pollution. You're literally sending them into a gas chamber to negotiate. That isn't the best state of mind to be negotiating, right? So we're not even good as a venue for holding these conferences. So, it is what it is.
So my last question about this topic is: do you think Trump's personal relationship with Putin can at least restore some trust in the U.S.-Russia relationship, because they are the two largest nuclear armed superpowers in the world?
No. Look, trust is almost impossible to achieve right now. Maybe over a 20, 30 year sustained process, if it continues to be Republican for those 20, 30 years, which it is not going to be. So you're going to have Democrats, and it's going to run a certain way, and there's nothing you can do about it. It's trust, no. But can you reach some kind of a modus vivendi where you're at least talking to each other, which isn't even happening at the moment? Possibly, yes. Possibly. I'm not very optimistic about it, but possibly, yes.
It remains to be seen what happens when Trump takes over.